Good afternoon to you, and I'm glad that you found time to be with me this afternoon. The show is Diaspora Dispatches. We're going to bring you the latest news from across the continent of Africa, and we start our bulletin this afternoon from Burkina Faso. And the French ambassador to Burkina Faso, Luc Hollande, is still at work in the capital Ouagadougou, a French diplomat source told the AFP News on Tuesday. The former French colony has seen a surge in anti-French sentiment as it moves to develop closer ties with Russia. Government spokesperson Jean-Emmanuel Ouedraogo confirmed to the Associated Press that Ambassador Luc Hollande was asked to leave but provided no further details on Monday. The announcement of Hollande's expulsion comes less than 2 weeks after the United Nations resident and humanitarian coordinator in Burkina Faso, Barbara Manzi, was also declared persona non grata. Burkina Faso has been wrecked by violence linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State group that has killed thousands and displaced nearly 2 million people. The current military regime overthrew a previous junta last year, claiming it had not done enough to stop the fighting. The previous junta had cited the same reason for seizing power from a civilian government months earlier. Anti-French sentiment has been growing in the former French colony since the new junta leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, seized power in September. He has been more overtly open to working with other countries, notably Russia. Last month, Burkinabe Prime Minister Apollinaire Joachim Tambele visited Russia to strengthen relations and consolidate efforts to combat extremists in the region, and that is according to Russia's foreign ministry. And then the latest from Somalia, the President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, in his New Year's speech on Sunday, declared the country will eliminate Al-Shabaab Islamist militants this year. Mahmoud's all-out war against the group, declared last year, has succeeded in pushing the militants out of some areas under their control. The president also said Somalia would also take over security operations from African Union peacekeeping mission in Somalia by the end of 2024. The Somali National Army's recent success against Al-Shabaab, achieved with the help of allied local militia in central Somalia, has attracted regional and international attention due to its homegrown approach in fighting terrorism. Mahmoud has been trying to rally Somalis behind the government, and his speech referred to Al-Shabaab as Kawarji, a term referring to a person who deviates from the path of Islam. Mahmoud said that Somalis have taken a stand against Khawarij, regardless of where they live, and that this battle is in the progress and nearing completion. He said it was his hope that Somalia will be prosperous and peaceful in 2023, and this term has elicited a lot of mixed reactions in Somalia and outside. Police in Somalia say 2 suicide car bombers killed at least 10 people early Wednesday when they targeted a military facility in a region at the heart of the government's offensive against Al-Shabaab extremists. Mahas is at the center of the ongoing government offensive against Al-Shabaab, the Al-Qaeda-linked group of thousands of fighters that has controlled parts of central and southern Somalia for years. The government has vowed to defeat it this year. The Somali army, together with the local militias, recently opened a key supply route to Mahas, and after it had long been under siege, Al-Shabaab has claimed the responsibility for the attack this morning. We head back to Burkina Faso. 28 bodies that were found in northwest Burkina Faso over the weekend. The government said that the rights activists blamed a volunteer militia created to support the army's battle against jihadis. Attacks targeting the security forces and civilians have increased in recent months, especially in northern and eastern regions bordering Mali and Niger. Preliminary reports indicate 28 people killed, this report said, adding that investigation had been opened and urged calm. But a rights group called the Collective of Communities Against Impunity and Stigmatizations pointed the finger at the Volunteers for the Defense of the Fatherland, a civilian auxiliary force that supports the military in its 7-year-old fight against jihadists. The public prosecutor Inona Amel Sama said in a statement that the most of the victims, all of them male, were shot dead. The landlocked West African country is one of the poorest and most volatile nations in the world. Since 2015, it has been grappling with an insurgency led by jihadists affiliated with Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State group that have killed tens of thousands and displaced around 2 million people so far. We go to Tanzania, and President Samia Suluhu Hassan has lifted a 6-year-old ban on political rallies. Her predecessor, the late John Magufuli, banned public rallies in 2016, 1 year after he came to power, saying they could escalate into violence. The president made the remarks at State House on Tuesday during a meeting with leaders of political parties. Since coming to power after the death of the predecessor John Magufuli in 2021, Hassan has taken steps to break away from his policies, which were seen as muzzling political dissent. Some opposition politicians say the president's move should be a foundation stone for democracy in the country. In previous speeches, President Hassan has touched on key issues affecting Tanzania, and particularly democracy, raising hope for change. Implementing these changes may yet prove to be a challenge despite the president's different approach. She is from the party as of Magufuli, and she'll need the backing of the members of this party, CCM. And then we go to Mozambique. The country replaced Kenya at the United Nations Security Council on Tuesday with a promise to prioritize the fight against terrorism. The country will serve at the council as a non-permanent member for the next 2 years. Mozambique has been battling an Islamist insurgency in its northern Cabo Delgado province. For the past 5 years, the conflict has displaced over 1 million people and killed about 4,000 others, according to official data. Mr. Camisario said the country who is taking that position said the country would also push for reforms at the Security Council to address African concerns. And the Security Council has 5 permanent members, and the United States, Russia, France, and United Kingdom and China, and 10 non-permanent members that are rotational every 2 years. Okay, we go to Gambia. Police prosecutors in the Gambia have charged 2 civilians and a police officer in connection with last month's alleged coup plot. The 3 men were charged with concealment of treason and conspiracy to commit a felony. They have denied these charges. They're accused of conspiring and failing to report information on the planned overthrow of President Adama Barrow in October and December 2022 within the capital Banjul and other places in the country. They were further accused of being informed by the alleged ringleader of a plan to overthrow President Barrow, which they failed to report to the relevant authorities. Last week, a national security advisor said civilians were involved, with their role being to finance the alleged foiled coup. In December, the government said it had thwarted an attempt to stage a coup and arrested some soldiers. This is the first time the accused people have been taken to court. The military personnel will be taken to a court-martial. Okay. And then we head over to Ghana. Ghana and Morocco have become the first African countries to impose travel restrictions on passengers from China over concerns over coronavirus. From Tuesday, Morocco has banned travelers from China regardless of their nationality until further notice. The foreign ministry says the move is aimed at preventing a spike in infections in the country. Ghana's restrictions will take effect on Friday. The move comes after China abruptly dropped its COVID-19 controls in December last year. Other countries outside Africa have also imposed restrictions. For example, passengers arriving in England from China now have to provide negative COVID test before they board a flight. The US is testing people on arrival. Countries that plan to test travelers say the policy will help spot worrying new variants early and prevent an influx of cases. And then the latest from Ethiopia. The Ethiopian army says it has liberated several localities from the rebel Oromo Liberation Army, OLA, in operations in the Oromia region, the military posted on Facebook on Tuesday. An armed senior army officer said the security forces have launched and coordinated operation to stop the subversion by the Shene and ensure stability in the region. The report said the army was carrying out a mission in West and East Guzi zones and Borina zones in South Oromia. The operation is aimed at annihilating the Shene, that is OLA, and creating a stable region, said Haru Gema, a senior official in East Guzi zone. The OLA, which claims to fight for the right of ethnic Oromo people, was designated a terrorist group in 2021. And puzzled Ugandans are still commenting on the government's New Year's post on Facebook celebrating 50,000 followers. The authorities banned Facebook in January 2021, accusing the social media platform of meddling in the country's affair. Facebook said at the time it acted after an investigation found that accounts were involved in coordinated effort to undermine political debate in the country ahead of Uganda's elections. President Yoweri Museveni then banned the social media platform for the last 3 years, and users have been using virtual private network, that is a VPN, to access Facebook. 2 weeks ago, Mr. Museveni said the Facebook would remain blocked in the country, and yet they are celebrating 50,000 followers. That is the official government of Uganda page on Facebook. The ridiculousness from this continent sometimes. Still staying with Uganda, a Ugandan music promoter has been charged with 9 counts of negligence over the death of 10 people in New Year's Eve stampede at a concert in the capital Kampala. Abi Musinguzi appeared before the Makindye Chief Magistrate's Court on Tuesday evening. He denied the charges and was remanded at Luzira's prison. The prosecution alleges he caused a stampede at Freedom City Mall when he closed outlets to the venue, leaving only one gate for more than 20,000 people to exit. The 52-year-old was arrested on Monday. His lawyers claim his client is being targeted because he is a known supporter of the opposition National Unity Platform leader Robert Changulanyi, also known as Bobi Wine. Meanwhile, the police have summoned more people, including the owner of the building, to record statements over the deadly incident. And 5 people have been killed in an attack by unidentified assailants in southeast Mali, about 80 kilometers from the capital, Bamako. The authorities said on Tuesday the victims comprised 3 civilians and 2 firefighters who were members of a civil defense force. Military ceremonies and burials for the 2 service members are due today. The AFP news agency reported the Monday attack is said to have happened in a part of the country where violence is rare, while a jihadist insurgency rages in the central and northern regions. And then we head over to South Sudan. Jonglei and Unity States have experienced a wave of dismissals as 14 officials were sacked by President Salva Kiir on Tuesday. And in a separate decree, President Salva Kiir also removed and appointed state ministers, county commissioners, and members of independent commissions for Jonglei and Unity State government, respectively. The reason for the changes were not mentioned in the decree. Meanwhile, the security situation in Jonglei State and Pibor administrative area remains extremely volatile as armed youth clashes continue to intensify, according to senior officials in the 2 areas. In December last year, a renewed communal conflict erupted between the armed youth from Jonglei State and Pibor administrative area. As a result, 56 people were reportedly killed and dozens of others were injured. The escalated fighting also displaced about 30,000 people, according to a United Nations report. Weeks later, the South Sudan's People Defense Forces sent its troops to the scene to flush out the armed youth, terrorizing the civilians, and return security to normalcy. Speaking to local media this morning from Bor Town, Jonglei State Information Minister John Samuel Manyuon said civilians are still in fear due to continuous attacks in the area. And that is the latest news from the continent of Africa. About 17 minutes past 3 p.m. A very good afternoon to you. Good morning, good evening, depending on where you're tuned in and watching. So just a round on quickly and some of the stories that perhaps I'd like for us to take a further look. Of course, the situation in South Sudan is worrying. The communal fighting, something that has refused to go away. And I was just hoping by the formation of the, what do you call it, of the United Force, there's a name for it. I think the Unity Force, something close to that. I'm forgetting the exact name. But the formation of this one united force for South Sudan, they passed out, I think, sometimes back last year. And initially, the number was supposed to be 75,000. And I think a number closer to that was able to pass out. Remember, these soldiers were being trained together for the last couple of years in the cantonment sites, centers. They're supposed to be trained and just to receive an army training so that they could come together and form one strong South Sudan army that will protect the country and the people of South Sudan and address the issue of insecurity that has been very prevalent in South Sudan. And I was just hoping that by now, perhaps because now they have this force, that the security apparatus or the security situation in South Sudan would have perhaps improved. But that is not the case, so you're left to wonder, what is the problem? Because that used to be one of the reasons why there were some complaints, and perhaps was being considered as a reason why the security is bad. Remember, these soldiers stayed in these cantonment areas for a very long time, and a lot of them even left these cantonment sites and went back to the communities with their arms. And it is said that because the conditions there were really bad, there was no medicine, there was no food, and it was really, the training centers are not your normal training centers for any army. Let's say, like we see Kenya Army when they go train, they have these training centers where you train as an officer, and then you pass out and normal training in any other country. So that was not the case. So the conditions there were very harsh. I think South Sudan has seen very tough times. So they try to make do with whatever they have, and finally, after years of these soldiers living in these terrible conditions, I think they were able to pass out last year. So I'm just wondering why the situation as far as the security in South Sudan has not improved. Why has it not improved? But there are a couple of driving factors that perhaps could help us in understanding why the situation in South Sudan, even as much as we feel like they're making progress. But this progress is not very tangible. This progress, they're taking 2 steps, perhaps 3 in front, and you think, okay, fine, we're seeing some movement, like the passing out of these forces last year. It was very commendable, because these are some of the requirements that were contained in the revitalized peace agreement of 2018. This is a working document that South Sudan had, after the mediation through IGAD and other bodies, after the fighting broke out in 2013, just 2 years after South Sudan got its independence. Remember? Okay, I'll not get into the details right now. So this was a working document that was supposed to enable the leadership, the transitional leadership that has been in transition for God knows how long now, to have a working modality that will help the country to transit, and finally for South Sudan to have to start their constitutional making process and have their own constitution, and South Sudan to just create foundations and the things that they need so that they can just pick themselves up and start building and rebuilding their country. Now, that hasn't happened. And one of the key requirements of the revitalized peace agreement, it stipulated the amount of time that was supposed to take after this agreement was signed for the country to go into an election. That has not happened yet. And I think when you look at everything that is happening in South Sudan, you can tell there is a concerted effort, and there is sort of a silent agreement, especially from the leadership at the top. And I'm almost convinced no one in the top leadership of South Sudan, be it the government or the opposition or these other stakeholders, is really willing to take this country to an election. So what do? We make sure that South Sudan is in a perennial state of chaos. Reports, I'm not just speaking because I'm speaking, there are reports that have been presented to the United Nations Security Council that has established that some of this communal violence, some of this violence has been sponsored by key players, either by this president's side or this other this other side, the first Riek Machar's side, or President Salva Kiir's side, or another person that is part of that government. So there is a deliberate move to ensure that South Sudan does not become peaceful, so that South Sudan can realize these other important aspects of this revitalized peace agreement to help it in transition, so that South Sudan can finally go have its election, and then the country can move on. So they are committed to not seeing South Sudan move on, because why do you see all this insecurity all over a sudden, specific areas? And I think Riek Machar has been accused, is it, of supporting what they call the White Army. Sorry, before we went for the break last year, I think there was a story that I was reading in a local media in South Sudan that some quarters were calling on Riek Machar to, address the issue of white army or something like that. Is what they're called, one of the groups that is causing this chaos. So I think the situation in South Sudan should be interrogated, and in this new year, I don't know what else the stakeholders can do. The elections are meant to be happening. They've been postponed now for a couple of times. So they're supposed to be having the elections is next year, 2024, and I think they're already setting up for not wanting to have this election. This is how they normally start. So before you know it, the country's in chaos. The situation is not favorable, so now we have to postpone this election again. And on one side, I would understand, because how do you have elections when you have a good number of your people wallowing in very bad conditions in refugee camps? They can't be in their homes because security is not guaranteed. They're always moving. They're always, in a crisis. So it is a very dicey situation. And me, for myself, I think what I'd like to see happen in South Sudan, especially from these other international players that have been involved in helping and aiding the peace process in South Sudan, I would like for the leadership of South Sudan to be held accountable. I think that is what needs to happen. We've seen a number of people being sanctioned and every now and then and things like this happening. But I think there needs to be some measures that will be put in place to ensure that the people who are sponsoring this chaos, United Nations Security Council, just receiving a report is not enough. Receive a report. If this information is credible, the international community needs to take action over the people who are involved in sponsoring this chaos and this conflict. So right now, I think in the recent past, the escalated fighting, according to the United Nations, has displaced about 30,000 people. And weeks later, the South Sudanese Defense Forces sent its troop to the scene, that is around December last year. And even after the Defense Force, the South Sudan Defense Force sent its troops to the scene, nothing has really changed. So what is really going on in South Sudan? What is happening? Why are we not seeing any changes as far as the security apparatus in that country is concerned, even after the country realized one of the very important requirements in the revitalized peace agreement of having a united force? They have one now. So they should be able to take care of this of the security in South Sudan. Why does that not? Why are we not seeing any changes? What is happening? I know South Sudan right now, it's under arms embargo, and I think it must have been renewed. I think it was supposed to be renewed in November. It must have been renewed. So South Sudan has complained because they're unable to buy arms to fight and to protect themselves, to equip their army properly because of the conflict that is ongoing. South Sudan is under arms embargo, Somalia is under arms embargo. Countries which are under conflict, usually the United Nations will place an arms embargo over this country. So they can't really acquire, or no country can sell them. You can't have any kind of arms business with them. And so South Sudan has been crying foul over this because they're saying a lot of these other militant groups, or these other groups that are causing the insecurity, they are properly armed. But the government forces, others, I was seeing what the officials were passing out. There are others who did not even have guns, when they're doing the parade and all that. Others were holding sticks and all that. So it was a very sorry state of affairs. So perhaps they don't have enough of these arms. So should the United Nations Security Council review this arms embargo against South Sudan to ensure that the country is able to have enough ammunition to protect itself, or what should happen now? Because either way, this is something that has to be addressed now. But I'll just go back to where I started this conversation. There has been reports that have been presented to the United Nations itself that has indicated that key officials in the government are the ones who are supporting this conflict. So if the United Nations has all these reports, then you would understand why it is not in a hurry to lift this arms embargo against South Sudan. So, but I think this is something that we should all be watching and see how perhaps the security situation in South Sudan improves this year. I hope it does. Now, President Museveni banned Facebook from Uganda into January 2021, 2 years now, I believe, almost, because he accused the social media platform of meddling in the country's affairs. Remember, Uganda had its elections in 2021, I believe, and during that time. So it had its elections in February 2021. So Facebook was banned January, just a few days before the elections. And so Ugandans were puzzled. Myself, I was just going through this story and I was just amused. And I just joined Ugandans in that amusement. And they're still commenting on the government's New Year. Uganda, there's an official page for the Ugandan government on Facebook. So in the New Year's post, the government was so elated, very happy, because it had achieved a 50,000 mile followers. So the government was very happy and it was celebrating. We have 50,000 followers on Facebook, a site that we banned. It's not even supposed to be operational in Uganda, but hey, we have 50,000 followers. And so Ugandans, are really amused by this. Facebook said at the time after the ban that it acted after investigation found that some of the accounts were involved in coordinated effort to undermine political debate in the country ahead of Uganda's elections. That is 2021. I told you the elections happened in 2021 in February. I think February, was it 14th or 12th? But in February or 4th. But in February 2021. So President Yoweri Museveni banned the social media platform for the last 3 years, and users have been using virtual private network to access Facebook. And just about 2 weeks ago, President Museveni also reiterated that Facebook will remain blocked in the country until they looked at some of these issues that the government of Uganda had raised in line with why they banned Facebook from Uganda. But Ugandan government, you're celebrating your achievement of 50,000 followers on Facebook. Okay. All right, let's just move on to other important matters. I don't know if I want to speak about, Ethiopian army saying that its raid against the Rome rebels is successful. I think my position on this, and I could be wrong, but I think my position on this matter is that the government of Ethiopia should perhaps engage with the Oromo Liberation Army. I know they were designated as a terrorist group in 2021. TPLF was also designated as a terrorist group in 2021, but that did not deter Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed in holding a conversation with them. And we saw there was a breakthrough, and now that part of the country and the rest of Ethiopia, they're trying to rebuild and move forward. So that should be the case, because as much as you fight and you're successful in muting some of these things, what if some of the issues that they're fighting for, they feel are legitimate? And they feel like we need our voices to be heard. Or maybe, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, you might feel, how they're raising these issues, or the issues that are being raised don't have any kind of legitimate standing. But sometimes having a conversation can avert a lot of unnecessary damage and loss of life, like what we saw happening in Tigray region. If somebody would have engaged in a conversation, if the TPLF would not have been aggressive, instead tried to engage with the government in a way that it was more peaceful, and perhaps the government responded in a similar manner, these thousands of people who died and loss of property that happened in that region would not have happened. Sometimes, maybe I'm just an idealist, but a peaceful and harmonious environment. Because at the end of the day, why did these people die? You've talked, you've fixed, you're on your way to perhaps fixing these issues that you agreed and you want to rebuild, and you've all agreed that you're part of the bigger family of Ethiopia and you want to stay like that. So why wouldn't a conversation have happened in the first place? Why did we have all these people die and all these losses that have been incurred in this region, while you could have been using that strength and time and to do other things that will be beneficial for Ethiopia as a country? So even with the OLA, I still feel like, or perhaps it is them that needs to have that peaceful approach towards the government, because if they continue doing some of these things that they are doing, they are also aggressive in their approach in how they want to be listened to. And so if OLA, you're coming in aggressive and you've taken arms and you want to fight against the government will not meet you clapping their hands and just being happy. The same aggression will be met with aggression. So maybe you should also learn other means of diplomacy and expressing your issues without having to engage in aggression, without creating a conflict that at the end of the day, if all is said and done, might not have been, necessary. The OLA were fighting together with TPLF, fighting against the government, but the government decided to have talks with TPLF and has refused to have any kind of negotiations or talks or mediation with OLA. So OLA is feeling some type of ways. I'd like to know what their problems are. I think I have a bit of an understanding, but maybe Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed does not feel like this warrants any kind of meeting with this group. So, but I'm just hoping, because when you hear the army say they've liberated several localities and they've been able to, they've been successful because they've been launching a coordinated operation to stop the subversion by the OLA. Okay, but I was just hoping that a conversation or just a mediation or just a coming together would have perhaps helped in addressing some of these issues, because a lot of this is political problems. So you can't successfully address political problems with an army approach. But the OLA is also taking an arms approach, so it will be very difficult. But a lot of these are political issues that could be solved, and of course under other underlying factors that could be really, solved by a means of a conversation. So now there's an update. Oh no! Before I get to the update in Burkina Faso and France. I think this new move by Tanzania President Samia Suluhu, who has now lifted a 6-year-old ban on political rallies, I think is a great move, and I like that she is taking her time, but she also seems to be deviating quite largely from her predecessor, former late President John Magufuli. She seems to be opening up space in Tanzania because Magufuli was in power for a couple of years, I think about 5. Yeah, he had just been re-elected for his second term, and then is it 2-3 months later he died. But he really had really muzzled up some freedoms in Tanzania, and some spaces in Tanzania, in media, in politics, and opposition figures are finding it very difficult to operate within Tanzania or have any dissenting voice within Tanzania. And this new move by Samia Suluhu, I think she's really I don't want to bring the gender card here, so let me just leave that there. But you can see this is somebody who is concerned about her country, and she means well from every decision she's been making. She means well, and I think this represents the true spirit of if you have taken your time to just learn and have a look at the life of their founding father, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere. I think she brings out a lot of that. Mwalimu Julius Nyerere really focused so much on a united Tanzania, on a Tanzania that everyone feels represented, where every voice mattered, and where you were your brother's keeper or something like that, Ujamaa. Yeah, he was a socialist, and Tanzania largely is a socialist country. And that's why we deviated during the first East African Community in 1977. Kenya, we are capitalist. That's our ideology. We are a capitalist society. Uganda, sometimes you don't know where they belong. They're either a capitalist or a socialist. They're somewhere in between. It's never very clear with them. But so we differ ideologically as countries. But some of the seeds that were planted by Julius Nyerere, I think, have done a great deal of good for Tanzania as a country. And so when I look at some of the things that now current President Samia Suluhu is doing, I think it really rekindles the spirit of their founding father, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, who was interested in seeing a united Tanzania. And you can see how she's been reaching out since she became president. She's been reaching out to the opposition. She's been trying to make changes to ensure that Tanzania moves forward. And even when it's moving forward, everybody feels as if their voices matter, and as if they're part of Tanzania as a country. So this new move, I think, is lauded. And I think she said that she might look at, because one of the key things that the opposition has been pushing for is the change of their constitution. Tanzania, once the Electoral Commission declares so-and-so is the president, there's no recourse. You can't go to any court and challenge that. That announcement is final by the Electoral Commission, so they don't. The Constitution does not allow for, say, what we have here in Kenya. But even for us, there are situations that necessitated these changes in our constitutions. I think it is in the process, and President Samia said she will consider, a new constitution or process after the elections that will be held. Is it in 2024 or thereabout? Okay, so she said she might be open to having these changes in the Constitution so that the Constitution could be alive to addressing the issues of the day as it is. Okay, so I think that is a very good move there by Tanzania's President Suluhu Hassan. Now, okay, just I want to go very quickly because my time is almost running out. So yesterday I had a news item here, and I was explaining to you how French ambassador to Burkina Faso, apparently Luc Hollande, had been, Ouagadougou had said, we don't want this person here. That is according to a French diplomatic source who had said, but now they're saying he's still at work in Burkina Faso, but it's not very clear. Now, the former French colony has seen a surge in anti-French sentiment as it moves to develop closer ties with Russia, and government spokesperson Jean-Emmanuel Ouedraogo confirmed to the press that Ambassador Luc Holon was asked to leave. So Burkina Faso is saying they asked the French ambassador to their country to leave, but France is saying that he is still at work. So which is which? I remember, according to the Vienna Convention on Diplomacy of 1961, once a host country or a receiving country has expressed its concerns and has decided that your ambassador or any person, a foreign mission in the country has to leave, then that's it. It reserves the right, and that is, under several articles, I think, in that convention, Article 5 of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations says the sending state may, after it given due notification to the receiving state concerned, accredit a head of mission or assign any member of the diplomatic staff, as in the case may be, to more than one state. But Article 9, the receiving state may at any time, and without having to explain its decision, notify the sending state that the head of the mission or any member of the diplomatic staff to the mission is persona non grata, or that any other member of the staff of the mission is not acceptable. In such a case, the sending states shall, as appropriate, either recall the person concerned or terminate his functions with the mission. A person may be declared non grata or non-acceptable before arriving in the territory of the receiving state. So if Burkina Faso has decided they don't want a French ambassador to their country, there is really nothing France can do unless they really engage in diplomacy. But once Burkina Faso has declared this person unwanted in their country, then France has to ensure that their ambassador is not in Burkina Faso. So we are receiving conflicting reports. France is saying, no, our ambassador, Holon, is still in Burkina Faso. But another senior official and actually government spokesperson, Jean-Emmanuel, he's saying, that he was asked to leave. So I don't know which is which, because this ambassador has been very critical, and usually this Western ambassadors, especially in African countries, they really meddle sometimes. They really, sometimes you wonder why. And I don't see our ambassadors from the continent when they are in their missions abroad, if they don't meddle so much. There's no room even for their voices in the US, in the UK. They don't even they don't comment on issues there. But these foreign missions in African countries, they normally feel as if they have I do understand they represent a mission in a country, represents the interest of their country, so they represent their government in the receiving country. So but it is how they act sometimes. So I guess Burkina Faso, because right now it is in a very wonderful relationship with Russia, the Russian mercenaries, so it does not want anybody to interfere with that. And so France, of course, has been opposed to this vehemently, so that has brought up a very difficult working relation. So this ambassador, Holon, has been very vocal and critical of what is happening in Burkina Faso and how the military junta is handling. And remember, the military junta, they were supposed to have just a transitional government to a certain period of time, but now it's not known when Burkina Faso will have its elections that will help them transit back to civilian rule. So this French ambassador was very critical on this matter. So the junta under Captain Ibrahim Traoré was just tired of his criticism. I remember Russia right now, some key Russia mining companies have been given key mining rights in very important mining sites in Burkina Faso. So Russia is doing pretty well with its new found friendship with Burkina Faso, of course, at the expense of France, which has been having its presence there for a very long time. being their former colony, but now its presence there is being challenged. And as I said there yesterday, Burkina Faso is following on the footsteps of Mali. Exactly what we've been seeing playing out in Mali is what is being replicated here in Burkina Faso. So one of the things that France also was protesting about, and I was explaining here yesterday, France protested that there were some anti-French protests in Burkina Faso, in Ouagadougou, the capital in particular, and France's premises, were vandalized by protesters, and France was not pleased by that because it said Burkina Faso as a country did not provide its premises, the protection that, Burkina Faso was supposed to. And France was right. I think I had these stories some months back. It's true. The facilities of French embassy in Ouagadougou was actually, when the protesters were protesting, some damages were made in that. And the government of Burkina Faso has a responsibility, according to the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations of the 1961, has a responsibility to protect. And Article 22 of that convention is very clear. The premises of the mission shall be inviolable. The agents of the receiving state may not enter them except with the consent of the head of the mission. So you can't just walk in. And that's why you see after Khashoggi was murdered in the Saudi embassy in Turkey, Turkey could not just enter there. There had to be a process, a lengthy process, because that is considered the property and the country of Saudi Arabia inside of Turkey, those embassies. So you just can't access an embassy like that. So it remains inviolable. The receiving state is under special duty to take all appropriate steps to protect the premises of the mission against any intrusion or damage and prevent any disturbance by the peace of the mission or impairment of its dignity. So, Burkina Faso failed to do this over the premises, the mission of France during those protests. And the premises of the mission, the furnishings and other property thereon, and the means of transport of the mission shall be immune from such requisition, attachment of execution and all that. I'll not get into the details. So, France said Burkina Faso failed to protect their premises, and in doing so, Burkina Faso contravened this Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. So that is that. So I don't know. Perhaps they will tell us, France, is your ambassador still in Burkina Faso or not? According to Burkina Faso, he's supposed to have left. And according to France, he's still there. But as I've explained in the Article 9 of this convention, if Burkina Faso decides they don't want this person in Burkina Faso, there's nothing France can do about it. They'll just get their person and perhaps replace him with another person that will be acceptable to their receiving state. I want to thank you so much for your time this afternoon. This has been Diaspora Dispatches. My name is Miriam Agutu. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.